Why do people have abortions? There is a lot of controversy and protest on this topic, especially lately because of the latest Supreme Court decision. Because of that, there is so much conversation about abortion, whether it should be legal, whether it shouldn't, what the rules and parameters should be around abortion. But what I'm not hearing a lot of is people actually discussing why people have abortions in the first place. Here's the thing. People on both sides of this discussion actually should want abortions to decrease. If you're pro-life, then it's obvious why you would want to decrease abortions. You believe that abortion is murder, and so you want to decrease the number of actions that you see as a murder. But people who are pro-choice often want to decrease abortion as well. Even if you don't believe that abortion is murder, abortion is a medical procedure. No one wants to have more medical procedures in their lives. So on both sides, people generally would want to see abortion decrease. In his 1992 campaign, Bill Clinton often said that we need to keep abortion safe, legal, and rare, and I think that a lot of pro-choice people would agree with that sentiment. But in order to understand how to decrease abortion, one of the first things you need to understand is why abortions happen. It's not impossible, but pretty difficult to decrease something that you don't understand at all. So in this video, we're going to tackle the question of why people have abortions. Now in this video, I'm very often going to be using the term women when I'm referring to specific research answering this question. This is because I'm referencing researchers who interviewed women asking them why they might have abortions. Now, I know that lots of people of all genders can have abortions. Abortions are not only limited to women, but I also don't want to represent the research. If researchers only asked women and not people of all genders, then I want to represent their research faithfully and describe the research as they did it, not how I would have done it. Okay, so let's tackle the question of why people have abortions. Some of the best research on this topic, and this is research that we're going to go into in a lot of detail, comes from 2013. It's called the Turnaway Study. In this study, 954 women, all aged 15 or older, who had interacted with an abortion clinic, were interviewed in depth about what happened, why they had sought an abortion clinic, what's going on in their lives. The main research question was, why do people have abortions? Now, the researchers listed percentages here to describe this percentage of women listed this reason, this percentage of women listed this reason, but these percentages won't add up to 100. They're going to add up to more than 100, and that's because many of the women they interviewed had multiple reasons. Here's what they found. 40% of the women they interviewed said that they had abortions specifically for financial reasons. Some of the quotes from these women when they were interviewed were things like, "I don't have the means. It all boils down to money. I can't afford to support a child. I didn't even have the money to buy a baby spoon." That's what one woman said. Some women referenced the fact that they didn't have a job and they didn't have any unemployment. For example, "My husband and I haven't had jobs in a while, and I don't want to go back to living with other people." Some people said that they lacked insurance. "I'm unemployed. I have no health insurance." Some women said that they were having abortions because they didn't want to rely on government assistance. For example, somebody saying, "I don't have enough money to support a child and I don't want to have to get support from the government." What you're going to see as we look through the other reasons is that even though only 40% of the women specifically said, "My reason is financial," you'll see that a lot of the other reasons are very interwoven with finances as well. So, for example, 36% of the women said the timing was bad. For example, here's a quote from someone who said, mainly, I didn't feel like I was ready yet. I didn't feel financially or emotionally ready. So that would be an example of someone who said their issue was timing, but when they explained, it turned out that finances were a big part of why they felt the timing was bad. There was a 25-year-old who was looking for work and already raising another child who said, so many things are going on right now, physically, emotionally, financially. It's pretty busy and I can't handle anymore right now. So again, this is someone who listed finances as she was listing other reasons as well. 31% of these women listed partner-related reasons, such as not having a good, stable relationship, not being with a supportive partner, or even being with an abusive partner and not wanting to bring a child into that situation. 29% of women said they need to focus on their other children. For example, feeling overwhelmed. One woman said, I already had 2 kids and it would be really overwhelming. It's kind of hard to raise 2 kids by yourself. Another person said, my son was diagnosed with cancer. His treatment requires driving 10 hours and now we found out we need to go to New York for some of his treatment. The stress of that and that he relies on me. 20% of women thought that a new baby would interfere with future opportunities. For example, saying, I didn't think I'd be able to support a baby and go to college and have a job. Another person says, I still want to be able to do things like having a good job, finish school, and be stable. And another person says, I wouldn't be able to take time off work. My work doesn't offer maternity leave, and I have to work to afford to live here. If I took time off, I would lose my job, so there's just no way. You can see that this reason is very intertwined with finances as well. 19% said that they were not emotionally or mentally prepared. For example, I am not mentally stable to take that on. Another person said, I have a lot of problems, serious problems, and so I'm not prepared for another baby. And another person said, I would say my reason is mental in the sense that it would really be a burden because then I would have to watch 3, my hands would be full. 12% of women cited health-related reasons. For example, my bad back and diabetes. I don't think the baby would have been healthy. I don't think I would have been able to carry it to term. Another woman said, because I've been doing drinking and the medication I'm on for bipolar disorder is known to cause birth defects. And we decided it's akin to child abuse if you know you're bringing your child into the world with a higher risk for things. 12% said they wanted a better life for the baby than she could provide. For example, I can't take care of a kid because I can barely take care of myself, and I don't want to bring a child into the world when I'm unmarried and not ready. Another woman said, I didn't want to do it by myself. I couldn't, and the man was abusive and horrible. I didn't want my kid to grow up with a father like that. Another woman said, I've been unemployed. It's not a decision I can face morally without being able to raise it properly. An abortion was the best option. And another said, because I do drugs. And my mom used drugs with me and my sister, and I swore to myself that I wouldn't bring a child into the world like that. So here's a question the researchers were actually able to answer. How realistic were these concerns? For example, were people just saying that they were too poor for a child when really they were making $500,000 a year? Or the people who said they were too poor for a child, were they really truly financially struggling? The researchers were able to test this and they found that in fact, people were being very honest about their reasons. For example, people who cited financial reasons tended to actually be quite a bit poorer. People who said that they needed to focus on their other children had other children. People who cited partner-related reasons for having an abortion were more likely to be older, separated, divorced, or widowed. People who cited future plans, worrying that a child would interfere with their future plans, were more likely to be younger, in college, and in good health. People who said that they were emotionally or mentally unprepared for a child tended to be quite a bit poorer. People who cited their own mental health did tend to have a history of depression or anxiety. And the people who said that they wanted to give a baby a better life than they could at this time usually had some college, they usually had no healthcare provider, and they had no other children. So there are several takeaways that the researchers concluded at the end of this study. One was that the women weren't reckless or stupid. They were viewing abortion as a responsible decision given what was going on in their lives. They also found that the women who had abortions usually were not actually anti-kid. Many of them already had children. They aren't anti-children, they just can't take care of this one. And finally, the biggest takeaway is that money is by far the biggest issue that is causing people to have abortions. Even though only 40% of the women actually cited financial reasons specifically, you saw all the way through the reasoning that was given that a lot of it was interwoven with finances. If women felt more supported financially, there would be fewer abortions. Now we're going to turn to a bunch of other research papers that I found that answered the question of how we decrease abortions. If decreasing abortion is definitely a goal of people who are pro-life and possibly a goal of people who are pro-choice, then it makes sense that both sides can come together in wanting to decrease abortions. So how do we make that happen? One big finding is that you can decrease abortion by enforcing child support. Women are a lot less likely to have abortions if they know that they can get child support. Researchers were able to find that in states that enforced child support better, the abortion rate, which is the number of abortions per 1,000 women, decreased. And this makes sense. A lot of women who have abortions already have children. If they knew that they could actually get child support from the fathers of their children, they would be a lot more likely to have more children. But when they're in a position where they're already seeing that their state doesn't enforce child support very well, it puts them in a financial bind to get pregnant again. Another research finding is that you can reduce abortion a lot by providing free or low-cost health care. During the debate over the Affordable Care Act, you might know the Affordable Care Act more as Obamacare, since that's what it's often called. But during that debate, there were a lot of Republican politicians who claimed that the Affordable Care Act was going to increase abortions. So a researcher actually tested this theory. It turned out that the state of Massachusetts had already implemented a plan that was a lot like the Affordable Care Act in 2007. So the researcher was able to find out if there were more abortions before this plan was implemented in Massachusetts or after. Does free or reduced cost healthcare increase or decrease abortions? What the researcher found was that introducing free or low-cost healthcare reduces the abortion rate. And honestly, this is a no-brainer. In the United States, having a child is very expensive. The cost of OB/GYN visits before the child is born to ensure that the kid is healthy, and the cost of labor and delivery is incredibly expensive. Then after the child is born, you have all of these other costs. If you can reduce those costs for people, of course it decreases abortion. Of course more people feel like they're financially stable to have a child. And the last major finding of how you reduce the abortion rate is make contraception available. This is perhaps the biggest thing that anyone can do to reduce abortions. If you want to see the number of abortions go down, you need to be advocating for free or reduced costs, condoms, contraception injections, pills, whatever you can advocate for. People need contraception if you want to reduce the abortion rate. There is lots of research that shows that this is the number one way you can reduce abortions. For example, states with easier access to contraception have fewer abortions. Another study that showed that contraception is by far the number one way to reduce abortion comes from Finland. This is because in 2013, Finland began offering all women a long-acting, reversible contraception for free. Anybody could get a long-acting contraception. When Finland started offering that, abortion rates declined by 16% within about a year or two. In fact, abortion rates are so tied to contraception access that researchers have even found exactly which kind of contraception access decreases abortion the most. For example, when people were given 3-month supplies of birth control pills, only 0.63% of them ended up having abortions. But when people were given a 1-year supply of birth control pills, only 0.18% of them went on to have abortions later. So the connection between contraceptives and abortion is very strong. The more contraceptives that are available, the lower the number of people who are having abortions. Let's summarize. When we talked about why people might have abortions, we saw that overall financial reasons were by far the biggest factor in people deciding to have abortions. So if you want to reduce abortions, you need to support people financially. We can also see that one of the things you can do to decrease abortions is to enforce child support. You can provide free or reduced cost health care. You can provide easily accessible contraception. All of these will help reduce abortions.